Well, a couple days ago we had the 4th of July, so I thought it'd be fitting to do an American philosopher for this week's video. And who better fitting than our friend Henry David Thoreau, who has some pretty relevant thoughts about the role of work and politics in our lives. I dug through the archives for this one. This is an essay entitled Life Without Principle, where he gives some general thoughts on how best to live. He starts by reflecting on the world he lives in, and take note of how easily this can apply to our world today. This world is a place of business. What an infinite bustle. I'm awakened almost every night by the panting of the locomotive. It interrupts my dreams. There is no Sabbath. It would be glorious to see mankind at leisure for once. It is nothing but work, work, work. Now, if you read Walden or watched my video on it, you may see some similarities here. Thoreau notices that everywhere, everyone is grinding. Now, obviously they're not working for the sake of working. People are working to get money. I'd say that's mostly the case today, but there's also a bit of hustle culture that celebrates work for work's sake. But is work good in itself? Maybe, but Thoreau would say that the type of work and the mindset behind that work is much more important than work itself, or even the money you might be paid for doing that work. To illustrate this, Thoreau gives an example of an interesting job description. Most men would feel insulted if it were proposed to employ them in throwing stones over a wall, and then in throwing them back, merely that they might earn their wages. But many are no more worthily employed now. So if work is good for work's sake, then wouldn't throwing rocks back and forth be a good thing? You might say that it's really the money that matters, and if you were to be paid a lot to throw rocks back and forth, you'd do it. Heck, I might. But then if money is the goal, does the job itself not matter? This makes me think of famous influencers and social media personalities doing degrading things to themselves or others for views and money. I'm sure, or at least hope, that everyone has their limit. No matter how much money you get, hopefully you have some line where you say that you will not do that thing. So then it's not the money we should exclusively look for either. Well, is Thoreau just saying we should be lazy? Or wait a minute, is he saying we should luck out and hit the jackpot like him and become a writer, doing something he loves to earn a living? Yeah, thanks for that really realistic advice, Henry. Well, Thoreau's actual advice is a little more nuanced, but realistic. The aim of the laborer should be not to get his living, to get a good job, but to perform well a certain work. And, even in a pecuniary sense, it would be economical for a town to pay its laborers so well that they would not feel that they were working for low ends, as for a livelihood merely, but for scientific or even moral ends. Do not hire a man who does your work for money, but him who does it for love of it. So it is good to love the job you do, or at least feel moral about doing it. Lots of jobs are a service to others, granted in exchange for money. So maybe you could focus on what service you are providing for others, even if you may not directly interact with customers. And if you can't find that moral good about your job, anything, maybe that means looking for a different career. So when Thoreau says, "There is no more fatal blunderer than he who consumes the greater part of his life getting his living," I don't think he's talking so much about work-life balance, although he'd certainly agree that that's also important. He's talking about doing something you love or want to do, so it's not simply for the sake of getting a living, but it's living itself. Thoreau also says that we should do this job well, and this relates to his own career. No, not as a writer, but as a surveyor. Thoreau apparently worked as a surveyor and thought of new methods and techniques to do his job well. Apparently this got some people mad because they wanted more land than Thoreau was telling them they had, but this pride and passion he put into his work also makes it less of a job and more of an act of living. Now, Thoreau doesn't only take shots at business or a busy work life, he takes shots at the media as well. He takes note of a certain triviality in the news. The news we hear, for the most part, is not news to our genius. It is the stalest repetition. Think of it like a scale. As your obsession with news and current events increases, your individuality decreases. It reminds me of people who are obsessed with a certain celebrity. In them, we recognize that they're basing their life off of someone else rather than cultivating their own individual personality in life. With the news, it's like that, but instead of hyperfixating upon one celebrity, you're hyperfixating upon a lot of other people. I think Thoreau would caution us that we don't get so involved in current events that we lose sight of ourselves. If you chance to live and move and have your being in that thin stratum in which the events that make the news transpire, thinner than the paper on which it is printed, then these things will fill the world for you. But if you soar above or dive below that plane, you cannot remember nor be reminded of them. Relating to this is Thoreau's attack on politics. But what he means by politics is not mere political opinion, because obviously Thoreau had a lot of those, but the way we engage in politics. To Thoreau, politics is the newspaper. It is the media. If you yourself are political, I'd ask you how you've engaged in politics within these last couple of days. Sure, maybe you did some activism, but I bet you consumed some form of media, whether it be corporate media or social media. Politics is not about having rational discussions with others and going to vote based on those exchanges, but rather, politics is all about headlines and news articles. The newspapers are the ruling power. Any other government is reduced to a few Marines at Fort Independence. If a man neglects to read the Daily Times, government will go down on its knees to him, for this is the only treason in these days. So if we can't fully rely on business, media, or politics, where can we go to find fulfillment in life? Well, Thoreau would be somewhat hypocritical to suggest one true lifestyle, but perhaps by eliminating these other influences and just focusing on ourselves, we might find what we really value in life. And I'm not saying to focus on yourself in a selfish way, but more of an observational way. If you strip away business, media, and politics, who are you? And how can you best live your life to satisfy who you truly are? Anyways, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button, and I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.